So a couple of days ago, I caught up with Serena from UK metal band Svalbard. If you don't know them, they're a Bristol-based post-metal band, and we talked about loads of different things from the fantastic new album that they've just released in September. We talked about the future of live music post-COVID. We talked about female representation in the music industry, and loads of different things. So I hope you enjoy it. New album's great. So I just wanted to ask, what's kind of inspired the creative process? Has it been different to previous albums, or has it been much the same? Talk me through that, if you could.
We're all a lot more confident as musicians now. I know me personally, my guitar lead's definitely improved dramatically. Like when I'm sort of playing the older stuff now in my room, I sort of go, oh God, this is so much easier than what I did on the third album. And I think that's just like from a confidence boost in playing so much. And then in terms of how we write as a band, I think we were really inspired a lot by the bands we toured with. We toured with Envy last year, we toured with Victims last year, and I think you can definitely hear, like, you know, the songwriting and the sort of atmospheres of Envy have crept into this third album, and then the sort of really driving melodic D beat of Victims has sort of crept into this album. Yeah, it's very much a product of our experiences. But in terms of how we write, we have always written the same way. We just write in the room. We all turn up for practice, and Liam will have a riff, and then I write leads over everything that he does, and then Mark, you know, does some insane stuff on the drums.
Yeah, it's one of the things that definitely stood out to me on this album and on previous ones, is that the drums really sort of elevate it for me. You know, in terms of there's like post-hardcore, there's like crust punk, D beat stuff with, you know, obviously a lot of black metal influences. And I mean, are you all kind of musically from different places, or do you kind of all share a lot of the same bands and it just kind of coalesces into this thing that is Svalbard?
We are from fairly different musical backgrounds.
Okay, great, yeah.
I'm sort of black metal, but would be the flavour that I bring to Svalbard. And then outside of that, I mostly listen to sort of soundtracks and power metal. So I'm like all about the melody and stuff. Like I don't really listen to hardcore or punk or D beat or anything. I mean, I have a select few bands, obviously Tragedy and Victims and stuff, but I wouldn't say that was like my forte. So it's always really funny to me when people describe us as that band, and I'm like, oh, not even into those things. But okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things that I take from your music is that it is very much coming from the drums, that those influences, but it's working in a way that obviously there are, you know, the guitars, for example, and the lead lines that you play are not crust punk or DB, or in my mind at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that kind of marriage of the two that really works for me. Does that happen quite naturally, or do you, you know, does everyone just kind of throw their parts in and it's different?
We've gotten used to it now, but we do argue a lot when we and that, you know, it takes us a long time to write a song. So it took us 2.5 years to write this album, and that was, you know, us together every single week working on it. But yeah, like, so to sort of, Liam obviously comes from a bit more of a hardcore. He used to play in like a sort of deathcore band as well, and comes from a lot more of that side of things. And then Mark's really into his kind of, yeah, like crusty, what's the word, like grindcore, that kind of stuff, which I think, as you said, you can really hear that in the drums. So we all sort of turn up and bring our different flavors and butt heads. So eventually we get tired of butting heads and a song is sort of born.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, I maybe had the assumption that you write a lot of the guitar parts. Is that not the case? Is it very much a collective
I write
effort?
my guitar parts, and
Yeah.
Liam writes all his guitar parts. So yeah, I do all the leads basically, and everything I'm playing is what I've written, and everything Liam plays is what he's written. But we don't tell each other what to play. Like I could never turn up for practice and be like, "Hey, Liam, play this." That's probably not going to happen.
Yeah. No, it's nice to hear that a band, a modern band, still have that sort of collective creative process? Because these days you do see, particularly with this kind of music, a lot of and not bashing that at all, but one person will write all of the parts at home and then they'll take it to the band, and that's great. That works for some bands, but I personally, having played in bands myself, I always got a lot out of just jamming in the rehearsal room or just sharing ideas and changing them and stuff. Is that, do you ever write just solely as individuals, or is it always that collective process?
With Svalbard, it's always been a collective process. And yeah, I really like that, what Liam brings into the practice room will be things that make me think in a different way. So, like, it kind of breaks you out of your rut when you're
Of
working
course, yeah.
with other people in the room, and you can kind of have that synergy and bounce off of each other and think in different ways. But before Svalbard, I was in a black metal band and I did everything.
Oh,
I was the musical dictator, and I have actually just during lockdown, I've written another black metal record, just
oh,
me.
excellent.
And so that's been like exploring that different side of like what it sounds like when all of it's just me.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's interesting. Is it kind of, I mean, if you can't say much about it at this point, I understand. Is it sort of like maybe more traditional black metal? Is it more like the sort of black gaze stuff that you hear today, or?
I would describe it as progressive black
Okay.
metal. So bands like Shil Magognar, bands like Enslaved have been a large influence. I do really like the euphoric, melodic style of black metal that's more prevalent now, but I'm not the world's biggest fan of black gaze in the form of bands like
Yeah.
Death Heaven, because I feel like it, they're obviously great at what they do. I'm not knocking it, but for me personally, it's like they've taken the edge off of the black, they've taken the ugliness away, and it's a bit
Yeah.
so I would say it's definitely melodic what I've been writing, but it's not pretty, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I hear that. It's very divisive, that whole scene, I think, and not necessarily in bad ways. It's just not to everyone's taste, is it? But yeah, like you say, I mean, obviously a great band. They're doing well for what they do. And is that going back to your side project there? Is that something that you have plans for to do it live later on, and obviously when gigs can resume?
Yeah, I've already started building a live band
Yeah,
that
okay.
compromises of my metalhead housemates so far. And yeah, like there's plans. The album's going to come out next year,
Oh,
and yeah,
excellent. Okay.
it'll be something exciting, I guess.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's great to hear. Um, yeah, so I mean, you mentioned lockdown, you mentioned writing throughout lockdown. Obviously, it's been a really weird time for everyone and for musicians in particular. I've heard people say that it's been a really creative time for them, or a really demotivating time, and some people saying it's a bit of both. How personally have you kind of navigated that, or found that it's worked or not worked for you?
It's been a really weird one, and I would definitely say it's been a bit of both for me. I've had a lot of stress because to enable touring with Svalbard as much as I did before, I always worked in like temporary 0 hours contract jobs, meaning as soon as lockdown hit, I lost my job.
Yeah,
It's like, I know so many people's been in the same situation, so I can't feel like too sorry for myself, but it was extremely stressful, and like job seekers benefits didn't come through for 3 months, so I was like really, really struggling financially. And then I think when you're in that situation and you're selling pedals, anything you can just to pay the rent, you're not in that creative headspace
yeah,
at all, because you're just trying to survive. But then once things sort of eased down and I did a bit more temp work and, started getting a bit more comfortable again, then the creativity started flowing and I did manage to, write an album. But I find it comes in waves. And
mm.
now I've just lost my job again.
Oh,
Thanks, second lockdown sort of rules, I guess. And yeah, like I am really feeling that wave of discouragement at the moment, because tours are being pushed back. Everything is so uncertain, to the point where you're sort of going, I hate to be like too down about this, but you go, God, I've sacrificed 10 years of my life for this. I've not got a career to enable me to do this band. And now I kind of feel like that's all been for nothing, because we can't even play shows, and yeah, it's been like it's a bit of a hard one. Like,
Absolutely.
like I wish I had the stability and the security now rather than a load of tour passes.
Yeah. No, I mean, there are bands at the upper level who can weather this kind of thing in ways that more independent DIY bands like yourself just are really going to struggle with. And no, I'm sorry to hear about your experiences there. It's definitely something I've heard other people say. But it's so personal as well. I feel that, you know, um, everyone is going through the same thing, but also that it's, it doesn't take away from your own experience. I feel that, it still feels incredibly difficult and stressful, like you say.
Yeah.
And I think the hardest part maybe is that we don't know when shows will resume. I mean, so when you've got bookings, I notice, confirmed for Arctangent and festivals like that, are you kind of looking towards those optimistically, or is it sort of very much with the reassurance that if it doesn't go ahead, that you'll be okay? Or what's that process been like?
It's been really weird because you obviously make your announcements for the festivals and you want to be
Yeah.
100% super excited, but you can't be
Mm.
because there's no guarantee that it's actually going to happen. So I'm trying to stay optimistic, and I'm trying to sort of look forward to the future and when these shows are going to be back on, but I'm also not I'm not banking on them happening next year because I mean, if this whole COVID has taught us anything, it's that, absolutely everything can just sort of be taken away from you. So you don't want to take things for granted anymore.
Yeah. And do you find that maybe that gives you a newfound appreciation for certain things as well? Where maybe, I don't know, if you're on the road for long stretches at a time, do you ever start to take it for granted? Whereas now you think, oh, I can't wait to get back out there. And
Yeah, I tell you what, I am going to make the most of every show from now on. Yeah, because sometimes, we did a lot of touring last year, and we were on tour this time last year. Thanks, Facebook, for reminding me that. And I remember at the time sort of being like, oh, my throat's really sore, I'm tired, I just want bed and everything, my own bed. And now I'm just like, no, God, I would absolutely kill to be back out there. And like, I think, you know, that's one thing I keep reminding myself is it's not going to be forever. And when those shows can return, just think of like how special that's going to be.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think music fans and musicians alike, we're all desperate to just get back to that first show and just party and enjoy it, Um, and I mean, it's been additionally stressful given the kind of maybe the government's response and the maybe the global response. Certain countries doing better than others, I feel, in terms of supporting the arts. But it must be very difficult to try and stay optimistic when you see that it doesn't feel like there's much of a kind of a value placed on music in particular, and venues closing left, right, and center. And
This is
um,
something I've struggled with in the last sort of month is basically feeling worthless and feeling like worthless to society. And every day at the moment, I wake up to 10 rejection emails for jobs, telling me that I don't have any relevant skills. And, seeing obviously the campaign and insistence from the government to retrain and basically give up any artistic dreams, it makes you feel stupid. And I don't know where this mentality in the UK comes from that music is something you should grow out of, or
mm,
music is something that you shouldn't take seriously. And oh, give up on that silly guitarist dream and work in a bank, like that's more respectable or something. But it really does. It makes you feel like, yeah, like you're not worth anything in the UK society. And then add into the fold the whole Brexit thing, which is really going to damage touring. So even when we can tour again, European tours are going to cost us a fortune in visas and tax for merch now. That
mm,
it's really hard. To be totally honest with you, it's really hard not to feel completely defeated by the whole thing and just go, okay, right, that's it. Sell my guitars, go and work in Halifax. That's
yeah,
it.
of course, it's suppose very much a two-pronged sword. You've got that passion that's keeping the music alive, but equally, your passion is maybe beset by all of these external factors. I was following the Brexit situation closely. I have friends whose tours are going to be affected by things like that, and it was it was weird to get personal accounts of what they think it's going to be like and stuff, because you hear a lot in the news and you hear a lot of back and forth from lay people on Facebook and what have you, but until you hear from musicians how it's going to affect them, you don't really grasp the situation. And it's just been a very weird time. Looking forward to what will the future of music be. So with that in mind, obviously live streaming and live stream gigs and digital gigs and things like that have become such a sort of thing over the last few months. Me personally, I don't know if there's much of a future in those things, if it could ever, say, replace actual gigs. But as bands, are you all kind of thinking like, well, this might be the future of music? It might mean less gigging, it might mean more online, but obviously not everyone's keen on that. So are those discussions you've had as a band, or?
Yeah, we were in the sort of process of figuring out a couple of live streams, because it felt really weird releasing an album and not being able to play an album release show. Because
Imagine, yeah.
that's normally like where you get all your feedback from the album, is people come to the show and hearing the new songs and telling you what they think of them. And like, yeah, it almost felt like the album wasn't out yet because we didn't have that opportunity. So we are going to do some live streams, but me personally, like, I'm not wild on them, because I think the whole thing with a gig is it's that social, it's a community, it's the coming together of people who have passion for the same thing, and that is a kind of just a really positive experience and stuff, and way to meet people and like all sorts of things. And I think I don't really need another excuse to sit in my room in front of a screen on my own. I've already got a million of those,
Yeah.
so I definitely miss the kind of communal aspect of it. I think I've definitely seen some where they've had like a chat down the sides, and I think that can be quite a good thing if it's utilized properly, like so that people can sort of still socialize, because that's the whole point of a gig, is to bring people together, I think. But yeah, we'll sort of see how they go. And also, I think another thing is like bands in general, I mean, I can only speak for us, don't play anywhere near as well as we do on the record when we play live. Like, there's mistakes. That's part of being human and part of, delivering a passionate, energetic performance. But I feel like recording that and under the microscope of a camera and like proper like sound gear to make it all sound clear, I'm like, oh God, we're going to sound rubbish. Like, everyone's going to be sat there watching it and giving it their full attention, which you don't really do in the same way at a show. You're moving, you're getting into it, you're with your friends, kind of thing. So it's going to be interesting. I'm really worried that like we'll do the first stream and people are like, oh my God, Serena can't play. So like
Yeah, I think you get a certain amount of liberty with that live as well, because it's so much about the energy of the show, and it's more important that people have a good time, and that you exude that enjoyment. I mean, it might come in the form of really aggressive screaming, but you're still enjoying yourselves, I take it. And
yeah.
it's so weird. You just don't get that with a live stream. It might be clinically perfect, but it's just such a different energy, and I think not being able to vibe on the crowd as well, and you just must draw so much from that. I've
Yeah.
seen a few where bands are delivering like an arena show, like and it's just an empty room, and I mean it's great for what it is, but it just doesn't feel the same.
No.
So yeah, I mean I look forward to seeing those. I have seen some really good ones. It's such a different thing that maybe bands' mentalities are just going to change going forward, and is going to be a staple of their career. But separately, you've maybe got the live thing still continues, albeit maybe at a reduced sort of capacity, but hopefully not. But
I think for me personally, I'd always rather perform to people than to a camera.
of course,
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah, absolutely. I hear that. I think that's what most people would prefer.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the album there. How's the response been to the new album? Because it for me it feels very different. Maybe, I mean, in some ways, to the previous release. Um, do you feel people have enjoyed it, or people have been overly negative, or?
The response has been amazing. Like, I'm still sort of trying to process it. Like, every day getting tweets or messages on Instagram about how much people are into the record, which is kind of surreal for me. Like, oh yeah, I'm really pleased. Like, personally, it's my favorite album we've ever made, because I feel like it's got a lot more atmosphere and yeah, just a bit more going on dramatically, musically, that kind of thing. So to see people also feel that way as well is like, it's really nice that that feeling resonates among our fans as well. And yeah, I'm just sort of really blown away by it. I don't think it's ever going to feel real,
Yeah.
that we've made a record that people like this much. So yeah, it's been really good. And like, there's been actually probably the least negative comments for this album compared to the other one, which I was quite surprised by because there's a lot more clean singing on this album. So I was fully prepared for the, they've gone all soft and written choruses, banish them forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, there hasn't been a lot of that, so that's good.
Yeah, no, it's one of the things I picked up on definitely is that you've really embraced the clean singing a little bit more. And I read somewhere that for example, singing clean over heavier sections was kind of a new element for you. Do you feel your voice has become better over time, or is it just that you feel more comfortable experimenting sonically, or do you practice vocals in the same way that you practice guitar?
It's a weird one. Like, I used to be able to sing clean quite well, and then doing black metal and doing Svalbard damaged my singing voice.
Oh, I see.
So it's definitely weaker and softer than it used to be. But I was really keen to have like the clean singing over the heavier guitars because I think that's a really nice contrast. So we just went for it in the studio, and I'm really pleased with the results. And I think that definitely took confidence to give it a go. But I am still a bit scared of doing it live because my scream is quite, like, not to blow my own trumpet, my scream's quite powerful, and my clean voice isn't. So I think those levels, it might get a little. We need a really good sound engineer who can just stand there and turn up quickly every time I start clean singing.
Excellent. Okay. And how has it been releasing the record on Church Road Records? Have they been very supportive? Has it been kind of a different vibe for you? How's that been?
Oh, it's been so much better. Yeah, it's been really good. I mean, we worked with Justine at Holy War anyway, and then when she announced that she was leaving because of the allegations, that was really positive for us because it meant that she was on the same page in regard to how we felt about everything that happened. So that was like really important to us, that we worked with people who are of the same moral viewpoint. And yeah, I mean, we knew we could trust her. She's got so much passion for bands and all things heavy, and so much knowledge and expertise. Like, she's worked at a record label for what, I don't know, 5-6 years now. So she was super helpful. And obviously, it's Sammy, her husband, as well. Had started Church Road Records, and now they've sort of taken it on together and turned it into this whole big thing. But like, yeah, super happy with it and really pleased with everything they've done for us, and like, sort of can't really thank them enough for swooping in and saving the record and making sure it still got released on time after everything that happened at Holy Roll.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. I'm really glad to hear that. So obviously, Justine singing in Employed to Serve as well. One of the things about your band for me was that I kind of discovered you guys at a time when I also discovered a lot of female fronted bands or bands with females in. And in particular, when I saw you guys for the first time at Arctangent, I think it was 2018,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
Yeah. And I was just blown away by the support that there is for female musicians, where, maybe at the bigger festivals, that's just completely lacking. I've seen a lot of criticism for particular festivals where that representation just isn't there.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the scene? Is it kind of moving in a positive direction, or is it sort of still, is there a lot of work to be done in terms of representation?
I think the underground and the more independent festivals are exemplary in their representation of women on stages. Festivals like Arctangent, 2000 Trees, Damnation in the UK, Roadburn in the Netherlands, these kind of more artistic festivals where you get proper good underground bands and good headliners, not absolute trash on the main stages. Or even Bloodstock. Bloodstock have a great lineup. Like, we're playing Bloodstock next year, hopefully, and loads of great women on that bill. And I think the smaller festivals are leading the way in terms of representation for women. And then you've got bigger festivals like Download, who have very few women on their main stages. And I did a big tweet about this last year that kind of blew up, and I probably shouldn't draw back to it. but I'll just say that tweet had consequences. And yeah, so I will. Oh God, I'm digging myself a hole here. But yeah, like hopefully, all I'll say is hopefully in the future, Download can maybe get a better attitude and be a bit more open to having women on their big stages. But we'll see. I think the problem with that is because people always sort of say, well, like, oh, don't force it. And I don't think the 50-50 pledge is a good idea, because I don't think putting gender before the actual sound of the band is the right way to go about it. I don't want to be booked because I'm a woman. I want to be booked because Svalbard fit the bill musically. But you'll have the Download festivals like Download attract a more mainstream crowd, and they're the kind of people who won't be exposed to something like Arctangent or bands, all the great women that we see on stages at Arctangent. So they believe we don't exist. And that's where the problem comes from, is people go, oh no, but there aren't any good women in metal. And it's like, well, there are, but you're not being shown them, because we're not being given a chance to get to those bigger stages, because apparently women sell less tickets. So yeah.
I completely resonate with that. It's something I feel personally as well, is that you do see a lot of but most metal musicians are male, or most metal fans want to see males, and things like that. Very ignorant comments, but I do think it's honestly led by those festivals. So where you are exposed to, as you said, a lot of female bands at Arctangent, and you just see that the talent is out there. It's clearly, it's not something that's tucked away. It's there. It's just, it needs to be given that stage. I completely understand what you're saying, and I do think it has to be led by the industry first, rather than, these bands shouldn't be fighting for that representation. It should just be, as you say, they're talented. It's
I think this is the one part of the issue that I've had, is when I've written pieces about this issue, people have come back to me and said, you want to get on the main stage at Download, be a better band. And then the argument is always that women can't do it, and that they're not talented, and that they're not worthy of a slot on a stage at Download, because these kind of people genuinely believe it's a meritocracy. Like, they believe that to be worthy of second headline slot at Download, you need to be a good band. And I'll just, say, like, bands like Dion would have that slot, and are they talented? I'm just getting really mean now, but like, there's this misconception that it's a barometer of like how talented you are, and that if there's absolutely no glass ceiling, and there's no closed doors to women, and there's no negative attitudes in those board meetings. Heads of Download didn't say things like women don't belong on the main stage because they would prefer to be in the crowd watching the guys on stage. That attitude, apparently doesn't exist. And it's all about, if we were talented enough, we'd be on there, which, I mean, you go to Arctangent and Damnation or Roadburn and you will see that we are. It's just, we're not being given those slots. And I hate this kind of denial of our, experiences, that we're being sort of shut out from certain platforms. And then the men come in and go, well, no, that's not the case. It's just that you're not good enough.
Yeah, I think it needs to be normalized for people like that. They need to see better representation before they'll start to believe that those bands are out there. Which is why it's so important that all these festivals get on board with that, in my opinion. Arctangent was a huge moment for my partner who came with me that year, and just as a woman, seeing all of these female bands was just hugely inspiring to her, and reassuring that she's been to Download and she's probably seen the flip side of that. It's so it has a huge effect on people, and it just needs to be driven by the industry, I think, unfortunately.
I think another thing that's a factor is the concept of risk, in that, another complaint that larger festivals like Download have is that they book the same headliners every year, and they're afraid to book younger bands as well.
Yeah, of course.
That's not going to sell. And basically what people need to get into their heads is they have the same mentality towards women, in that booking Nightwish for a headliner for Download would be considered a risk, which is absolutely crazy when they've sold out Wembley Arena. You know what I mean? They're bigger than Ghost, but like, that will be a risk to have them play the main, headline the main stage. And it's that kind of mentality of, I guess, they've got to think about their finances and how much it costs to put on a huge festival like that. But I would definitely say that, festivals like Download are hugely afraid of breaking out of this male dominated, big 80s, classic band formula that they have. And that's why it's sort of feeling like the same festival every year.
Yeah, I completely understand that. So in terms of the you mentioned risk there. I feel personally, as bands get bigger, they get to the sort of the stage of playing arenas and things. There maybe is an awful lot less risk involved in how they market themselves or how they even perform their music. I'd never really like to use the word sellout, but obviously that gets leveled at a lot of bands as they sort of get bigger and bigger. Do you find it's easier to maybe hold on to your integrity at the level that you're at, or as you get bigger, it's sort of a case of compromising it all, or is it really important to Svalbard that your message comes first and things like that?
I think Svalbard will never be a big band because we prioritize our message and our integrity. Like, we're probably never gonna play an arena tour or anything like that, because we won't dilute the feminist aspects of our band. We won't dilute the left-wing aspects of our bands or the songs about animal rights. And I'm very, very aware that to get a larger following, you have to sort of water things down a bit. You have to make things easier to swallow, more generic, like a kind of generic lyric that anyone can relate to, rather than a very specific lyric about how revenge porn affects women, for example. But that's not something, I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't choose to. I mean, obviously it'd be nice to have financial stability from that, but that's literally the only plus side I can see to becoming a huge band. But that's definitely not on our agenda. We're not prepared to make the sacrifice. And the problem with that as well is you have so many people whose livelihoods depend on you. Like Metallica, so many people depend on that band existing and touring for their jobs, costumes, set design, sound engineers, all these people. And then that influences how they are as a band, because they have to play it safe, because everyone is relying on it no matter what. And I think you can become trapped within that confine of success.
No, that's an interesting point. I hadn't really thought of. Yeah, and I think one of the great things about Svalbard for me, one of the reasons I resonated with your music when I discovered you a few years ago, was that integrity and that kind of the message for me personally is what got me into the band. Just finding lyrics that were saying things that I thought and delivered in an aggressive, passionate, powerful way. It's sung to me really, and I think unfortunately, yeah, you do see, there's a lot of maybe political bands or bands who start political and slowly gravitate, they grow and become bigger and their message does become more diluted. It's probably very difficult to not alienate, the people who got into you for those things in the first place. These days you see a lot of, politics and music should be separate. And it's, I hear that all the time. And I just think when has it ever been separate?
Yeah, exactly. People always say that about metal, don't they? They say, "Oh, politics and no politics in metal." I'm like, have you listened to War Pigs by Black Sabbath? The founding fathers of metal were singing about politics.
Yeah.
It's that, and I just can't imagine having the audacity to think you can dictate what a musical genre should and shouldn't sing about. Do you know what I mean? That's insane to be like, "Oh no, well I don't like it, so bands possibly can't possibly sing about it." That's absolutely insane. Imagine being so put off by and politics affects everyone. So it's bizarre to me. If there's one thing that a lot of people are going to be angry about in the world, and metal is an angry form of music, is going to be the frustrations of the political system. But then people have the audacity to say, "Oh well, keep it out of metal." Well, what should we sing about then? All
Yeah.
and swords all the time. I mean, I personally would love that, but you got to have a variety.
Yeah, of course. For me personally, at the sort of the point that I'm in my life anyway, and just over the last few years, I've really gravitated towards the bands with those political messages and, the passionate way that it's delivered. So, which you don't really get from other genres, except maybe from punk music, punk and metal. It's the anger is kind of key to it. And I mean, you can't write about other things as well, of course, but it marries quite well with the things that we're actually angry about. I mean, just to give you an example, I saw somebody chastising Tom Morello about being political in music, and he said, "Well, I have a master's in political science."
Yeah.
It's bizarre to me. How dare you talk politics? And have you ever listened to Rage Against the Machine?
Oh, yeah. What do you think they're raging against?
I think it's that safety and the risk assessment. They want to be able to enjoy music and escape from reality for a bit, but they also want to be able to maybe have shittier opinions and kind of just I don't understand how you can enjoy the music knowing what it's talking about, but I guess everyone's different.
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so with your passion for power metal, do you find that seeps into Svalbard, or is it completely separate? Do the lead lines that you play, for example, are they very power metal infused, or?
My lead lines are mostly inspired by gaming soundtracks.
Oh,
Like
cool.
the Skyrim soundtrack is my favorite piece of music of all time.
Oh,
And yeah, I'm always sort of looking for that similar feeling, or like, the Final Fantasy melodies. There's been times at practice where I've written a guitar lead and gone, oh, that's from Final Fantasy. But like, yeah, that would be melodically, that's my main source of influence, is like gaming soundtracks or film soundtracks. Big sort of fan of that style, and like how, it, because it's instrumental, it lets the music speak the language rather than the words.
yeah,
And I'm always searching for that similar feeling where like the melody talks to you here and stuff. Um, and but then with the power metal, like I love power metal. It's like my most listened to genre, but I'm not talented enough to play it. So yeah, it doesn't really influence it. It's one of those things. I remember someone saying you're always fascinated by the things you can't do musically, and I think that's what draws me to power metal, is that I've tried learning Symphony X songs on guitar, I've tried learning Dragon Force, and I just can't do it. But that makes me love it even more because it's like such a virtuoso playing, I guess.
yeah, no, totally hear that, and it's something that I do think probably seeps in some ways. So in terms of Svalbard's music, I always think of the epic leads that very much speak to me, and people who like that kind of music. And it does separate you maybe a bit from the typical black metal bunch in that it elevates it beyond that kind of sort of tritone riffs all the time and things like that. There's a lot of melody in there, which
Oh,
is crucial
oh.
for me personally.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
so
the same way.
excellent. So I mean, a little off topic, but what's your favorite non-musical pastime? Do you have things to take away from music? Do you are you a gamer, for example? You mentioned.
You've opened a can of worms here. Yeah, I do love gaming. I'm mostly just like RPGs, like I say, Skyrim, Final Fantasy, that kind of stuff. Currently, an Argonian in Skyrim. Just did the whole Paarthurnax and Alduin dragon bit. That was good. Took out some dragons with my dragon wren shout. But yeah, aside from like gaming, my main passion is roller coasters. I basically, when I'm not being Serena from Svalbard, I travel the world going to theme parks, riding roller coasters. I'm a staff
Amazing.
member of the YouTube channel Coaster Force. We have 1.2 million subscribers. It's a thing. It's a whole
Oh,
thing. There's a
excellent.
whole community. It's kind of like it's trying to explain underground metal communities to people who aren't familiar with it. That's the same thing as like theme park enthusiasm. But yeah, I've ridden 645 different roller coasters around the world. And I just got back from like a week in Germany, going out there and trying some like prototype roller coasters and stuff. So yeah, like that's my main passion in life, and it's
Excellent.
very niche.
It's probably really important for you guys to have those things outside of music, and particularly you mentioned traveling there. You can probably end up seeing a lot of the world through music, but not really seeing it. I hear bands say this all the time. Uh, Is that the same for you? Do you like to visit these places even if you see just a glimpse of them?
It's definitely the case where you spend all day driving, you get to the city, and all you see is the venue and the place you're sleeping. You don't really have time because you've got to do your sound check, and you've got to, sort out everything, set up the merch, and then the gig started, and you want to watch. I always make a point of watching it, all the other bands that we play with. So, like, you don't get the opportunity. I think people, family can often think, oh wow, you've been to all these countries. Oh, you're always off on holiday. And it's like, it's not a holiday. It's like grueling 15-hour drives sometimes, and like, not getting any sleep and stuff. But like, if we do have time, I'll try and sort of go into the city and explore a bit. But most of the time, yeah, there's this sort of myth that being on tour is like this magical holiday and you see all these sites and stuff, and you don't really. You see the venue that you play in, so you could be anywhere really. But yeah, so then when I travel for theme park stuff, admittedly, I basically just end up traveling and just seeing the theme parks. I do try and squeeze in a bit of culture too.
Yeah, okay. One of the things I wanted to ask was I'm very interested in how geographically music is kind of shaped. So particularly in the UK, you seem to get maybe a lot of metalcore in, say, Sheffield in the north. Down south, there seems to be almost like a lot of pop punk bands emerging from there. If you, or even Svalbard, had come from a different part of the country or even a different part of the world, do you think the music would be very different? Is that
Oh, no one's asked me this before. That's an interesting one. Maybe, yeah. Like, I feel like if we'd come from Scandinavia, maybe we would have leaned more on the black metal side of things, or maybe more on the melodic crust side of things, because you've got all the melodic Swedish crust as well. I also feel that, we probably, if we'd have been born as a band in Sweden, we'd probably be doing a lot better because their government supports musical artists. It has like a fund that they give to anyone who can prove they're touring and writing music. And then basically they really support you, help you buy a van to tour in and make sure you've got accommodation to live and stuff like. Yeah, and that's why 90% of the top 40 chart is filled with Swedish songwriters and Swedish artists because they're actually supported in their endeavors. I feel like, yeah, maybe if we came, I'm not sure how much it influences because we're so stubborn with our music taste anyway that maybe, I don't know, maybe if we were from around the M25, we'd have a bit more like beat downs because that seems to be a thing, doesn't it? Like,
yeah, definitely. It's
cool.
I guess it's a lot to do with the scene that springs up around there. Maybe prominent bands. You've got prominent metalcore bands from the north, from Sheffield in particular. I guess that has an influence on bands lower down. In terms of the Bristol scene, is there a lot of bands like Svalbard, or is it? Do you feel that you've influenced that scene in any way, or?
It's really weird. Like, I don't even really identify Svalbard as a Bristol band. I mean,
Oh,
Liam lives in London now anyway, and I find the Bristol music scene is basically this massive circle jerk of like, just, can I swear?
I think it's fine. Yeah, I've already done it. So
Okay, yeah, it's like shitty indie and shitty post-punk and people with no melody and no like sense of anything interesting, repeating stuff from the past and pretending it's like the coolest thing ever. And everyone just thinks they're so fucking cool. Everyone's really aloof. No one's welcoming. Like, I don't identify as a Bristol band at all in the slightest. It's not, people go, oh, there's all these bands from Bristol and Bristol's like a music utopia. It's really not. Like, unless your face fits, a certain type of scene and a certain type of little clique, then basically you're not even regarded as any interest and stuff. Like, sometimes people are surprised to hear we're from Bristol. They're like, oh, you're actually a Bristol band. It'd be like, well, yeah, it's the place we're from, but I wouldn't say we were like influenced by any of the local bands around us, or even the bigger bands that have that Bristol's known for, like that whole kind of trip hop thing. It's boring, isn't it?
Yeah, personally, it's never been my cup of tea. Now that's interesting because you do see this more and more where nowadays, particularly in the UK, obviously it's still a relatively small country, but bands are more spread out. You mentioned one of your members living in London. Do you do a lot of stuff remotely these days? It's not that far to travel, I suppose, but
we're never going to be one of those bands that like records a bit on Logic and sends it to each other and works on songs that way. It just doesn't really, that's not really a dynamic that works for us. So at the moment, we're just practicing less often. So we practice once every 2 weeks now, and Liam comes down from London, and we don't even have a bassist. So there's only 3 people to coordinate at the moment. And that's sort of working out okay. Ideally, like I really love band practice. It's my favorite hobby because it's just hanging out in a room with your friends playing your guitar really loud. Like what's not to love? So in my opinion, I'd love to like be able to practice more, but at the moment, logistically, like it's just making it was similar last year. I moved away for a bit, and I was away from Bristol, and we did the same thing, sort of practicing every 2 weeks because you've just sort of got to make life work around the band, I guess. But we're not sort of regularly rehearsing at the moment.
yeah, no, I hear that. So I wanted to talk about the production. You've worked with Lewis Johns, on the new album. And correct me if I'm wrong, did you work with him on the previous album as well?
Yeah, he's done all our albums.
Oh, excellent. I hear a bit of a difference in the production on this, and particularly the rhythm guitars. Was that a conscious effort or something you discussed?
I think it's just Lewis getting better and better every time. Like you can hear if you sit there and you listen to like albums Lewis has recorded over time. I mean, they always sound great anyway, but they just get better. And he's one of those kind of producers. He like treats it like an art form, and he's always sort of looking for ways to make the guitars sound better. He's always on a tone quest and always like looking for great new gear and stuff like that. So it's like such a privilege to work with him. But whenever we record with him, he'll sit us down and he'll be like, what records do you really like the sound of and things? And I remember at the start of this album playing him the new Insomnium album, Heart Like a Grave, because I really love how the leads are kind of blended and like the guitars are so well balanced, but the leads really sing out. So that was definitely a thing. I sort of played him some of that Insomnium record and was like, please make it sound like this. Yeah, like overall, I think he's done an absolutely outstanding job. I mean, he just gets better every time. So, like, it's a real privilege to get to work with him.
Cool. And what other bands have you been excited about recently? It's been a weird year for releases. I find at the start of it, there wasn't really anything coming out I enjoyed. And then towards the tail end, there's been so much I've got into. What's been inspiring you recently, or what's been on your playlist?
I've had the same thing where this year started off a bit like, ooh, there's not much going on, and now suddenly there's loads to get excited about. I've been listening to the new Inferi record, which is kind of like, I guess, technical death metal with a sprinkling of black metal in there. It's not a full album, it's just an EP, but I mean, the amount of ideas they crammed into an EP, it's absolutely jaw-dropping. So that one is amazing. I don't normally listen to like deathcore and stuff, but recently someone played me the new album by Lorna Shore called Immortal, and it wouldn't normally be like my cup of tea, but they've added all these like synths and choral arrangements. So again, it basically sounds like the Skyrim music, but with death, kind of a bit like Dimmu Borgir doing deathcore.
Oh yeah,
it's really good, and like the melodies on it are absolutely glorious. So like really enjoying that one, Lorna Shore as well. And obviously the latest Nightwish album, which did come out a few months ago, but I like it because it's more progressive than the previous ones. So yeah, it's a really interesting one.
excellent. So I just had one more question then, really. It was if you had to endure another lockdown with your ideal supergroup of musicians, bearing in mind you would have to sort of form a bubble and live with them. So you might love them, but they might be insufferable. Who would be in that?
Steve Wilson.
Stephen Wilson, yeah.
Yep, because I'm in love with him, so he can come and live with me and write music.
Cover on the Arctangent stream, by the way. You did Porcupine Tree, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, it was a fantastic cover.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, hope I didn't butcher it too badly.
No, it's great.
Yeah, definitely Stephen Wilson. Well, this is it, because like my taste is quite eclectic. I'm just going to pick people who probably would not work together well at all, Tuomas Holopainen, the keyboardist and songwriter of Nightwish. Probably like, ICS Vortex, the guy who does, well, he used to do bass and vocals in Dimmu Borgir. He sings for Arcturus now and in Borknagar, and he's just got the most incredible singing voice. So yeah, probably get him in. And Floor Jansen from, oh God, I'm just picking like, I just have all of Nightwish basically. Yes. And the latest singer of Nightwish, I think she's just got the most incredible dynamic voice. Annette van Giersbergen as well. I'm going to form a little choir. And it's going to be Annette van Giersbergen, Floor Jansen, me, and Justine Jones from Employed to Serve to do some like heavy stuff as well. And yeah, I don't know. Or drummer wise, I would actually have my flatmate is already like a really amazing drummer, so he can stay in my house and play.
It worked the first time, so
yeah, it's great. I hear him on his practice pads blasting away, and I'm like, yes, you're going to be in my black metal band.
Excellent. No, I mean that sounds like a really fun group, and doesn't sound like it would be too dramatic, like you wouldn't start killing each other. So excellent.
I hope not.
Well, thanks very much for your time.
Oh, thank you. It was really fun. I really enjoyed your questions.
Oh, I'm glad. Thank you. Okay, well, I'll leave you to it then. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. You can also find us on our website where we've got loads of reviews, including the new Svalbard album, and loads of other great content as well. And you can find us on all the usual social media such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We've got a Discord. We've also got a Twitch page where there are weekly streams. Thanks again. See you next time.